interfering with my investigation!
You don't understand! If I stop, he dies! You are killing him!
You're under arrest.
The call came in at 10:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Dispatch painted a grim picture. A multi-vehicle pileup on the I-10 eastbound, just past the downtown connector. At least one vehicle overturned, multiple injuries, possible entrapment. For Alex Cole, a 15-year veteran paramedic with the Phoenix Fire Department, it was a familiar surge of controlled chaos. He'd seen it all, from high-stakes combat deployments as an Army medic in Fallujah to the daily grind of urban emergencies. Adrenaline was an old friend, a tool he sharpened and controlled. His ambulance, Unit 22, was the first medical team on the scene. The sight was even worse than described. A cascade of twisted metal shimmered under the unforgiving Arizona sun. A sedan was crushed against the median, a pickup truck lay on its side, and an overturned SUV had become the grim centerpiece of the disaster. Alex's partner, a younger but steady EMT named Ben Carter, immediately began setting up the triage area. Alex grabbed the primary medical bag and headed for the SUV. The driver, a man in his late 40s, was trapped. He was hanging upside down, held in place by his seatbelt, his face a mask of blood and sweat. His breathing was rapid and shallow, a telltale sign of developing shock and potential chest trauma. Alex, calm and methodical, slid through the shattered passenger side window. "Sir, my name is Alex. I'm a paramedic. We're going to get you out of here," he said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of sirens and shouting. The man's eyes flickered with a mix of terror and relief. Alex worked fast. He checked for a pulse, thready but present. He stabilized the man's neck, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had performed these actions thousands of times. "Ben, I need the pneumatic shears and a backboard," he yelled over his shoulder. The sounds of the jaws of life starting up from the fire engine crew were a welcome roar. This was the symphony of rescue, a chaotic but coordinated dance to cheat death. He was assessing the driver's chest when he noticed the ominous sign. One side of the chest was rising with each breath, but the other was not. Tracheal deviation was starting, a tension pneumothorax. Air was filling the man's chest cavity, crushing his lung and heart. He had minutes, maybe less. "Ben, I need a chest decompression kit now," Alex commanded. Every second was critical. The pressure had to be released before the man's heart stopped completely. Ben was already there, passing the long needle and catheter through the window. Alex tore the man's shirt, swabbed an area between his ribs with alcohol, and prepared to insert the needle. This was the critical moment, the pivot point between life and death. It was then that a shadow fell over him. "You need to move this ambulance, now!" The voice was young, sharp, and laced with an unearned authority. Alex didn't look up. His focus was absolute. "I'm treating a critical patient. We can't move." "I don't care. You're blocking access for my patrol car. Move it, or I'll have it towed." Alex glanced up, annoyed. He saw a police officer no older than 30 with a crisp uniform and a jaw set with rigid determination. The name tag read Miller. His hand was resting on his holstered firearm, a classic posture of intimidation. "Officer, this man is dying," Alex said, his voice firm but controlled. "He has a tension pneumothorax. I'm performing a life-saving procedure. Nothing is more important than that right now." Officer Miller's eyes narrowed. He seemed personally offended by the refusal. "Are you questioning my authority? I am securing this scene. Your vehicle is in the way. That is a direct order. Move it. And I'm giving you a direct medical assessment. If I stop what I'm doing to argue about parking, this man will be dead in under 3 minutes," Alex countered, turning his attention back to his patient. "You can direct traffic around us, but we are not moving." The fire captain, a grizzled veteran named Dave Haskins, overheard the exchange and quickly intervened. "Officer, the paramedic is right. This is an active extrication and medical emergency. Patient care takes priority. We'll clear the lane as soon as the patient is stabilized and transported." Miller's gaze flickered from Alex to the captain, his frustration visibly mounting. He was a man who clearly wasn't used to being told no. He saw a scene of chaos that needed his brand of order, and he couldn't comprehend that his authority was not absolute. He saw a paramedic's calm confidence not as professionalism, but as defiance. "This is my scene," Miller said, his voice low and menacing, "and everyone on it will follow my commands." Alex ignored him. He had found his landmark on the patient's chest. He held the large-bore needle, ready to plunge it into the man's chest to release the trapped air. He could hear the faint, desperate wheezing. Time was gone. He had to act now. As he prepared to make the incision, a hand clamped down hard on his shoulder, yanking him backward with surprising force. "I said, step away from the vehicle," Miller snarled, his face inches from Alex's. "You're interfering with a police investigation." Alex was stunned. The needle fell from his grasp, clattering onto the asphalt. He looked from Miller's furious face back to the dying man in the car. The patient's eyes were rolling back into his head. "What are you doing?" Alex yelled, a crack in his professional calm. "You're killing him!" The absurdity of the situation was staggering. An investigation into what? A traffic accident? He was a paramedic, performing his sworn duty, and a police officer was physically assaulting him, preventing him from saving a life, all because of a perceived slight to his authority. But Alex was about to learn that for Officer Miller, bruised egos were more dangerous than crushed lungs. The collision on the highway was over, but the collision between duty and authority had just begun, and it was about to get much, much worse. The world seemed to slow down. The blare of the sirens, the shouts of the firefighters, the grinding of the rescue tools, it all faded into a dull roar. Alex's focus narrowed to two things: the dying man in the SUV and the officer whose hand was still clamped on his shoulder like a vice. He could feel Miller's knuckles digging into his collarbone. "Let go of me," Alex said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I have to treat my patient." He tried to shrug off Miller's grip, to get back to the man in the car, but the officer was resolute. "You're done treating anyone," Miller spat back, his grip tightening. "You're obstructing justice. Now you're going to learn what happens when you disrespect a police officer." The fire captain, Haskins, stepped forward again, his face a mask of disbelief. "Miller, stand down! That's a direct order from a scene commander. You are interfering with emergency medical services. Let him do his job." For a moment, it seemed like Haskins' authority might prevail. Miller hesitated, his eyes darting around. He saw the other firefighters stopping their work to watch. He saw Ben Carter frozen by the ambulance, his phone now in his hand recording. He saw other drivers who had gotten out of their cars with their own phones pointed in his direction. He was the center of an unfolding spectacle, and he had a choice: de-escalate and admit a mistake, or double down and assert his dominance. He chose dominance. With a sudden, violent motion, Miller yanked Alex away from the SUV, spinning him around. Alex stumbled, caught off balance. The move was so aggressive that his medical kit, slung over his shoulder, flew open, scattering sterile dressings, syringes, and vials across the hot asphalt. "You're under arrest," Miller declared, his voice ringing with a triumphant fury. He pushed Alex against the side of the overturned vehicle, the hot metal searing through his uniform. "Under arrest? For what?" Alex gasped, a mix of shock and outrage flooding his senses. "For saving a man's life?" "For obstruction, and for resisting," Miller said as he wrenched Alex's arms behind his back. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs closing around his wrists was a surreal, sickening sound. It was the sound of everything going wrong. In 15 years as a paramedic, he'd been assaulted by belligerent drunks and threatened by grieving family members, but he had never imagined he would be placed in handcuffs by another first responder for simply doing his job. "My patient!" Alex yelled, twisting his head to look back at the SUV. The man inside was now completely limp, his head lolled to the side. "Ben, get in there! Chest needle, now!" Ben Carter, snapping out of his shock, scrambled for another decompression kit. Captain Haskins was yelling into his radio, calling for a police supervisor, his voice a torrent of furious, clipped words. The scene had devolved from a coordinated rescue into a chaotic standoff. The very people meant to work together were now in open conflict, and the price was being paid by the unconscious man bleeding out in the wreckage. Miller began marching Alex toward his patrol car, parading his prisoner in front of the growing crowd of onlookers. The shame was a hot flush on Alex's neck, but it was quickly eclipsed by a cold, rising anger. This wasn't just wrong. It was a criminal act. Miller hadn't just arrested him, he had abandoned a dying patient. "You have a legal and moral duty of care," Alex said through gritted teeth as Miller shoved him toward the back of the cruiser. "You just violated it. That man's blood is on your hands." "You should have thought of that before you decided to play hero," Miller sneered, pushing him down onto the hard plastic seat. "You follow orders. It's that simple." The patrol car door slammed shut, sealing Alex in a cage of heat and helplessness. Through the metal grate, he watched the frantic scene unfold. He saw Ben, his face pale with stress, finally manage to get through the window of the SUV. He saw another firefighter helping guide the needle. He prayed they were in time. Every second that had been wasted on Miller's power trip was a second the patient's brain was being starved of oxygen. A few minutes later, a police sergeant arrived, his face grim as he took in the scene. A paramedic in the back of a patrol car, a fire captain practically vibrating with rage, and a dozen cell phones capturing it all. Alex watched as the sergeant engaged in a heated conversation with Miller. Miller was gesticulating wildly, defending his actions, his body language a cocktail of self-righteousness and aggression. Finally, the fire crew managed to extract the driver from the SUV. They had him on a backboard, an oxygen mask on his face, an IV line in his arm. They loaded him into Alex's ambulance. As Ben closed the doors, he looked over at the patrol car, his expression a mixture of fury and despair. The ambulance sped away, its siren a mournful wail that seemed to cry out against the injustice of it all. Miller climbed into the driver's seat of his cruiser. He didn't look at Alex. He just started the engine and began pulling away from the scene, leaving the chaos of the accident behind. The silence in the car was thick and suffocating. "You know you just made the biggest mistake of your career," Alex said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Miller adjusted his rearview mirror, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. "You think so? I think I just taught a valuable lesson about respect. You'll be out in a few hours. A misdemeanor charge. A slap on the wrist. But you'll remember it next time an officer gives you an order." Alex leaned his head back against the window. Miller didn't get it. He thought this was about a minor charge, a temporary inconvenience. He didn't understand the lines he had crossed, the laws he had broken, or the man he had just become. Alex wasn't just a paramedic. He was an Army veteran who had looked true evil in the eye. He was a man who understood chain of command but valued human life more. And he was not the kind of man to accept a slap on the wrist when he had been wronged so profoundly. Miller thought he was closing a chapter. In reality, he had just started a war. The drive to the precinct was a blur of sun-drenched streets and simmering rage. Alex focused on his breathing, using the same techniques he taught to countless panic attack patients. Stay calm. Observe. Document. His mind was already building a case, replaying every word, every action. This wasn't just a personal violation, it was an attack on his entire profession. At the station, Miller paraded him through the bullpen like a trophy. A few officers glanced up from their desks, their faces showing a flicker of curiosity before returning to their paperwork. To them, he was just another arrest, another piece of administrative churn. The process of booking was a meticulous, humiliating ritual. Fingerprints were rolled, a mugshot was taken, and his personal effects were cataloged and sealed in a plastic bag. His wallet, his phone, his keys, and the small, worn St. Michael medallion he'd carried since his first tour overseas, all of it was taken away. The booking officer, a weary, older cop named Peterson, looked at the arrest report, then at Alex's paramedic ID, and then back at the report. He sighed, a quiet, almost imperceptible sound of disapproval. "Obstruction of governmental administration and resisting arrest," Peterson read aloud, his voice flat. He looked at Alex. "You a paramedic, huh? Must be some story here." "The only story is that Officer Miller prevented me from treating a dying man," Alex said, his voice steady. Peterson just nodded slowly, avoiding eye contact with Miller, who stood leaning against a nearby wall, arms crossed, radiating an aura of defiant pride. It was a small gesture, but Alex recognized it. It was the silent language of cops who knew one of their own had crossed a line, but were bound by the unspoken code of the blue wall. Alex was led to a holding cell. The heavy steel door clanged shut, the sound echoing the finality of his situation. The cell was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of bleach and despair. He sat on the concrete bench, the adrenaline finally beginning to wear off, replaced by a profound exhaustion and a bone-deep anger. He thought of his patient. Was he alive? Did those stolen minutes cost him his life, or leave him with permanent brain damage? The weight of that uncertainty was heavier than any set of handcuffs. He had been in the cell for less than an hour when he heard footsteps approaching. A woman stood on the other side of the bars. She was in her late 40s, dressed in a sharp business suit, and carried a leather briefcase. Her expression was one of no-nonsense intensity. "Alex Cole?" she asked, her voice crisp and commanding. "My name is Evelyn Reed. Your union president called me. I'm your attorney." Alex stood up, a wave of relief washing over him. "Thank you for coming." "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," she said, pulling a legal pad and a pen from her briefcase. "I've already spoken with your partner, Ben Carter, and Captain Haskins. I have their preliminary statements. Now I need to hear it from you. Tell me everything. Don't editorialize, don't leave anything out. Just the facts, from the moment you arrived on scene." For the next 30 minutes, Alex recounted the entire incident in meticulous detail. Evelyn Reed listened intently, her pen flying across the page. She interrupted only to ask for clarification on specific points. "Did he ever identify what crime he was investigating? Did he ever ask for your identification before demanding you move the ambulance? Did you at any point physically touch him before he grabbed you?" "No, to all of it," Alex confirmed. His only concern was that the ambulance was parked where he wanted to park his car. The patient was an afterthought. When he finished, Reed clicked her pen shut. "This is more than just a bad arrest, Alex. This is a clear-cut case of unlawful detention, battery, and a violation of your civil rights under the First and Fourth Amendments. More importantly, in this state, interference with a certified emergency medical professional during the performance of their duties is a felony. Officer Miller didn't just break department policy, he committed a serious crime." She looked directly at him, her eyes sharp. "The DA's office will likely drop these charges by morning once they see the witness list, which includes a fire captain. But that's not enough. We're not just going to defend you, we're going to attack. We're filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Miller and the city. They arrested the wrong man on the wrong day." "What about my patient?" Alex asked, his voice strained. "Do you know anything?" Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "Ben called the hospital. The man's name is Marcus Thorne. He survived the surgery. The doctor said the chest decompression was performed just in time. Another minute or two and he would have died on the operating table. He's in critical but stable condition." Alex closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The man was alive. That was the only thing that truly mattered. "That," Evelyn said, tapping her pen on her notepad, "is the nail in Miller's coffin. We have a victim who nearly died because of his actions. We have a dozen eyewitnesses. We have video from multiple angles. This case is a slam dunk." She paused. "But something feels off to me. I've seen cops with big egos and bad tempers before. This feels different. The level of aggression, the immediate escalation over something so minor. It's almost as if he wanted a confrontation, as if he had a reason to create chaos and distract from something else." Alex frowned. What do you mean? I don't know yet, Reed admitted. But we're going to get the discovery, including all the body camera and dash camera footage from every officer on that scene. And trust me, we are going to watch every single frame. Cops like Miller always believe the system will protect them. They get arrogant, and when people get arrogant, they get sloppy. True to her word, Evelyn had him released less than an hour later. The charges were still pending, a dark cloud on his record, but he walked out of the precinct a free man. Ben and Captain Haskins were waiting for him in the parking lot. There were no grand speeches, just a firm handshake from Haskins and a supportive hand on the shoulder from Ben. As he drove home, Evelyn's words echoed in his mind. It's almost as if he wanted a confrontation. He had assumed Miller's actions were born of pure ego. But what if it was something more? What if the arrest wasn't the main event, but a sideshow? A calculated distraction designed to draw all eyes away from the real story unfolding in the wreckage of the I-10. The following months were a blur of legal maneuvering. Just as Evelyn Reed predicted, the district attorney's office dropped all criminal charges against Alex within 48 hours, citing a complete lack of evidence and conflicting testimony from the fire department. The official record was cleared, but the fight was just beginning. Reed immediately filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit alleging civil rights violations, false arrest, and intentional infliction of emotional distress against Officer Daniel Miller and the city of Phoenix. The city's initial response was predictable. Their legal team offered a lowball settlement, $25,000 and a non-disclosure agreement to make the problem go away quietly. It was an offer designed to test their resolve, to see if Alex was merely looking for a quick payday. Tell them to go to hell, Alex said without a moment's hesitation when Reed presented the offer. I already did, she replied with a thin smile. Now the fun begins. We're heading into discovery. For the next 3 months, Reed's office was inundated with documents, dispatch logs, and personnel files. But the centerpiece of their case was the video evidence. They had footage from Ben's cell phone, clips from 2 other bystander witnesses, and the dashcam video from Captain Haskins' command vehicle. All of it painted a damning picture of Miller's unprovoked aggression. The final piece of the puzzle, however, was Miller's own body camera footage, which the city's lawyers had fought tooth and nail to withhold, claiming it was part of an ongoing internal investigation. After a judge ordered them to release it, the video file finally arrived. Alex sat with Evelyn and her paralegal in a small conference room, the blinds drawn as they played the footage on a large screen. The video began with Miller arriving on the scene. The audio was clear, capturing the cacophony of the crash site. He exited his vehicle and walked toward the overturned SUV. The camera's perspective was jarring, showing Miller's swaggering, confident stride. The initial confrontation with Alex was exactly as Alex remembered it. Miller's immediate, irrational demand to move the ambulance, and Alex's firm but professional refusal. Look at his focus, Evelyn said, pausing the video. He's not scanning the scene for threats. He's not assessing the injured. His entire attention is locked on you and that ambulance. It's tunnel vision. She hit play. The footage captured the escalation, Captain Haskins' intervention, and Miller's furious, profanity-laced reaction after Haskins turned away. Then came the arrest. Seeing it from Miller's perspective was nauseating. The camera lurched as he grabbed Alex, the image a chaotic blur of motion. The sound of the handcuffs clicking was sharp and loud. "This is all we need," the paralegal said. "This alone will win us the case." "Keep watching," Evelyn said, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Don't look at the foreground. Watch the background." They continued playing the video. Miller was now marching Alex toward the patrol car. The camera was pointed forward, but its wide-angle lens captured the scene around them. As Miller passed the front of the crushed sedan, another car involved in the pileup, he angled his body slightly. For a split second, the camera pointed down toward the ground. "There! Pause it!" Evelyn commanded. They froze the frame. On the ground, near the front tire of the sedan, was a man's leather wallet. It was open, and the corner of a credit card was visible. Rewind 10 seconds. Play it in slow motion. They watched again, frame by painstaking frame. As Miller walked past the sedan, his foot subtly, almost imperceptibly, kicked the wallet, sliding it further under the car's chassis, out of the direct line of sight of most onlookers. It was a movement so slight, so quick, that it would be invisible to anyone not looking for it. "Why would he do that?" Alex asked, leaning forward. "Because he knew who was coming to get it," Evelyn whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. "Keep playing." Miller continued walking Alex to his cruiser. The camera's view of the sedan was now obscured, but in the background a new figure entered the frame. A man in a plain gray hoodie, who had been standing on the shoulder of the highway like any other bystander, began to casually walk toward the wreck. He wasn't a first responder, he wasn't a victim. He was just there. He ambled over to the sedan, knelt down as if to inspect the damage, and his hand disappeared under the vehicle for a moment. When he stood up, he immediately turned and walked away from the scene, melting back into the crowd of onlookers on the overpass. The entire sequence lasted less than 15 seconds. The room was silent. "He wasn't securing a scene," Alex said, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying clarity. "He was running a cleanup operation." "Exactly," Evelyn said, her voice grim. "He didn't arrest you because you disrespected him. He arrested you because you were the center of attention. You were the one person everyone, firefighters, cops, witnesses, was focused on. He needed a distraction, something loud and dramatic to draw every eye in his direction while his partner scooped up the spoils. It was a brilliantly simple and brutally effective strategy. The owner of the wallet was likely the driver of the sedan, unconscious and being treated by other medics. In the chaos of the crash, who would notice a missing wallet? And even if they did, who would ever suspect a police officer of orchestrating the theft? The arrest of a paramedic was the perfect cover, a spectacle so unusual and shocking that no one would be looking anywhere else. "This isn't just a civil rights case anymore," the paralegal said, his voice hushed with the gravity of their discovery. "No," Evelyn agreed, hitting save on the video clip. "It's not. We just found evidence of a criminal conspiracy, and Officer Miller's body camera is our star witness." The smug smile Alex remembered on Miller's face in the back of the cruiser now seemed infinitely more sinister. He wasn't just an arrogant cop, he was a predator who used his badge as a cloak of invisibility, and they had just pulled that cloak away. The discovery of the wallet theft on the body camera footage transformed the case. It was no longer just about one paramedic's wrongful arrest, it was about uncovering a potential criminal enterprise operating under the shield of the Phoenix Police Department. Evelyn Reed's legal strategy shifted from seeking damages for Alex to exposing a systemic rot. A predator like Miller never hunts alone, and he never does it just once, Evelyn explained during a late-night strategy session in her office. Pinned to a large corkboard were stills from the body cam footage. Miller's kick, the wallet on the ground, the man in the gray hoodie. "This was too smooth, too practiced. This is a system. Our job is to figure out how it works." Her team filed a new, expanded request for discovery, one that the city's lawyers fought with even more ferocity. They demanded every incident report Officer Miller had filed in the past 3 years involving a motor vehicle accident with serious injuries. They also subpoenaed the records of the civilian tow truck companies officially contracted with the city, and the dispatch logs that cross-referenced which officers responded to which scenes. The data trickled in, and Evelyn's team began the painstaking work of connecting the dots. They built a database, cross-referencing dates, times, locations, and responding officers. For weeks, the pattern remained elusive. Then, a junior associate had a breakthrough. "I wasn't just looking at the primary officers," she said, pointing to a complex spreadsheet projected on the wall. "I started tracking the backup units, the second or third patrol car to arrive on scene. And that's where the pattern emerges." She highlighted a name, Officer Frank Russo. Russo was a senior officer, a 20-year veteran with a reputation as a quiet, no-fuss cop. He had been a backup officer on the scene of Alex's arrest. He was also listed as a responding officer on over 60% of Miller's major accident calls. The connection was interesting, but not yet damning. The next step was to cross-reference these incidents with official property theft complaints. The results were startling. In nearly a third of the incidents where Miller and Russo were both present, a formal complaint had been filed within days of the accident for valuables missing from a vehicle: wallets, purses, laptops, jewelry. Every single one of those cases had been closed for lack of evidence. The victims were often incapacitated or deceased, unable to give a clear account of what they had in their vehicle. It was the perfect crime, hidden in plain sight amidst tragedy and chaos. "But who's the man in the hoodie?" Alex asked. The faceless thief was the missing link. That question was answered by the tow truck records. One company, Statewide Recovery, had an almost exclusive contract for clearing major accident scenes in Miller and Russo's precinct, and one driver's name appeared on the manifest for almost every single suspicious incident: a man named Kurt Webb. A quick background check revealed Webb had a sealed juvenile record for petty theft and a known association with Frank Russo dating back years. He was the man in the gray hoodie. The picture was now terrifyingly clear. It was a three-man crew. Miller was the aggressor, the one who created a diversion, controlled the scene, and identified high-value targets. Russo, the trusted senior officer, acted as the lookout, managing other cops and ensuring no one got too close. And Webb, posing as a bystander or arriving with his tow truck, was the collector, physically retrieving the stolen goods under the cover of the chaos Miller created. "Your arrest was the linchpin," Evelyn told Alex, her voice a mix of anger and awe at the audacity of the scheme. The victim in the SUV, Marcus Thorne, was a wealthy real estate developer. The police report noted a briefcase in his vehicle. Miller likely saw an opportunity for a major score, but you and the fire crew were too efficient. You were in his way. He couldn't risk Webb going near the car while you were working on the patient, so he manufactured a crisis. He needed to pull you away, and he needed a scene so dramatic that no one would notice Russo directing a tow truck driver to the wrong vehicle for a moment. Alex felt a cold chill. His ordeal hadn't been a random act of ego, it had been a calculated business decision. He was a pawn in their criminal enterprise, and his career, his freedom, and Marcus Thorne's life had been acceptable collateral damage. The knowledge was sickening, but it was also empowering. The lawsuit was no longer just about his own vindication. It was about getting justice for dozens of victims who had been robbed in their most vulnerable moments, while they were injured, unconscious, or even dying. Evelyn's team began quietly reaching out to the victims from the old, closed theft cases. They showed them the still frame of Kurt Webb in the gray hoodie. Several recognized him instantly as a strange man they had seen lingering at their accident scenes. One woman, whose husband had been killed in a crash 2 years prior, broke down in tears. His wedding ring, which he never took off, had been missing when his personal effects were returned from the morgue. Miller and Russo had been the responding officers. With sworn affidavits from these victims, Evelyn now had more than just a pattern. She had a conspiracy. She amended the federal lawsuit, adding Russo and Webb as defendants and including racketeering charges under the RICO Act, a legal move typically reserved for organized crime. The city's lawyers, who had once been so arrogant, were now in a full-blown panic. This was no longer a simple case of a cop losing his temper. This was a story that could bring down not just a few officers, but potentially cast a shadow over the entire department. The blue wall was beginning to show its first cracks, and the pressure was building. Someone was going to have to talk. The amended lawsuit landed like a bombshell. Naming specific officers in a racketeering conspiracy was a declaration of war, and the city's administration and the police department's top brass were sent scrambling. The local news media, alerted by an anonymous tip from Evelyn Reed's office, picked up the story. The headline was explosive. Hero Paramedic's lawsuit alleges organized theft ring within Phoenix PD. The story featured Alex's photo alongside Miller's official department headshot. It detailed the initial arrest, the dropped charges, and the shocking new allegations of a systematic wrecking crew preying on accident victims. For the first time, the public was seeing the full scope of what Alex had endured. The narrative had shifted. He wasn't just a paramedic who got into a spat with a cop. He was a whistleblower who had stumbled upon a dark secret. Behind the scenes, the pressure on the police department was immense. The FBI, alerted by the RICO charges in the civil suit, opened its own preliminary investigation into potential public corruption. Simultaneously, the department's Internal Affairs Division, which had initially treated Alex's complaint as a low-priority issue, was now forced to launch a serious, full-scale probe. Officer Daniel Miller and his partner, Frank Russo, were placed on paid administrative leave, a standard procedure that did little to quell the firestorm. They were isolated, ordered not to speak to anyone about the case, and stripped of their badges and firearms. For men who derived their identity from their authority, it was a profound humiliation. Evelyn Reed knew that a conspiracy is only as strong as its weakest link. While Miller was arrogant and Russo was a hardened veteran, she suspected there were other, more peripheral players involved. Officers who may have looked the other way, or younger cops who were intimidated into silence. Her team began a new line of inquiry, focusing on the officers who frequently worked the same shifts and patrolled the same areas as Miller and Russo. They were looking for someone who didn't quite fit the mold, someone who might have a conscience. They found him in a young officer named Mark Evans. Evans was only 3 years on the force. He was married, with a new baby at home. His performance reviews were exemplary, but he had recently put in for a transfer to a different precinct, a request that had been denied. He had been on the scene of Alex's arrest, one of the last officers to arrive. His body camera footage showed him mostly directing traffic, but he had a clear view of the entire confrontation. Evelyn took a gamble. She didn't subpoena Evans or name him in the lawsuit. Instead, she sent him a simple, hand-delivered letter. It said only that she was Alex Cole's attorney and that she believed he might have information crucial to ensuring justice was served. It included her private cell phone number. 3 agonizing days passed. Alex was on edge, knowing they were close to breaking the case wide open, but that it could all fall apart. Then, one evening, Evelyn's phone rang. It was an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was quiet, nervous. It was Officer Evans. "I can't be seen talking to you," he whispered. "My career, my family." "I understand," Evelyn said, her voice calm and reassuring. "You don't have to decide anything tonight, but you know what they were doing was wrong. You saw it. Alex Cole is a good man, and they tried to ruin him to cover their crimes. They will throw you under the bus to save themselves the first chance they get." She let that sink in. "You have a choice, Officer Evans. You can go down with them, or you can be the one who stood up and did the right thing. If you cooperate, I will ensure the federal investigators know you came forward voluntarily." Another long silence. Then Evans spoke. "There's a diner off the 202, tomorrow morning. 6 a.m., come alone." He hung up. The next morning, in a secluded booth at the back of a near-empty diner, Officer Mark Evans told Evelyn everything. He was visibly terrified, constantly looking over his shoulder. He explained that Miller and Russo ran their precinct's shift like a personal fiefdom. They called their scheme scrapping. Miller would identify a promising wreck, usually involving a luxury car or a commercial vehicle. Russo would then subtly clear the area of any unfriendly officers, while Miller did what was necessary to create access for their collector, Kurt Webb. Evans admitted that he and other younger officers knew something was going on. They saw the pattern, heard the rumors. But Russo was a training officer with immense influence, and Miller had a reputation for violence. To question them was to commit career suicide, or worse. That day, with the paramedic, Evans said, his voice barely a whisper, that was different. Miller was out of control. When he cuffed that guy, I knew he'd gone too far. It wasn't just about stealing a wallet anymore. He was willing to let a man die. I couldn't be a part of that." He told Evelyn that after the arrest, Russo had pulled him aside and warned him to remember what he saw, which was a paramedic becoming combative and uncooperative. It was a direct order to lie on his official report. Evans had submitted a vague, non-committal report instead, which had earned him a talking to from Russo and resulted in his transfer request being denied. He was trapped. Evans's testimony was the first crack in the shield, the breach in the blue wall they had been desperate for. He agreed to become a confidential informant for the FBI, wearing a wire to subsequent conversations with other officers involved in the ring. With Evans's cooperation, the federal investigation accelerated dramatically. The conspiracy, which had once been a matter of legal theory and circumstantial evidence, was now supported by an insider witness. The dominoes were beginning to fall. Alex's personal fight for justice had ignited an inferno, and it was about to consume the very men who had tried to silence him. With the explosive testimony from Officer Evans, the federal case against the wrecking crew became an open and shut affair. The FBI, armed with Evans' inside knowledge and wiretap recordings, moved swiftly. One early morning, simultaneous raids were conducted at the homes of Officer Daniel Miller, Officer Frank Russo, and their civilian accomplice, Kurt Webb. The arrests were the lead story on every local news channel. Footage showed a grim-faced Russo being led out of his suburban home in handcuffs, followed by a still defiant Miller who shouted obscenities at the news cameras. In Webb's apartment, investigators found a safe containing thousands of dollars in cash, high-end jewelry, and a collection of stolen credit cards, the fruits of their predatory operation. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of long federal prison sentences, the conspiracy crumbled completely. Kurt Webb was the first to fold, agreeing to a plea bargain in exchange for his full testimony against the officers. Russo, seeing his decorated career end in disgrace, followed suit. Only Daniel Miller, blinded by his own arrogance, refused to cooperate, maintaining his innocence right up until a federal jury found him guilty on all counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The sentencing hearing was a somber affair. The courtroom was filled with the victims of the theft ring, including the widow whose husband's wedding ring had been stolen. Alex Cole sat in the front row with Evelyn Reed. Marcus Thorne, the man he had saved on the highway, sat beside him. Thorne had made a near-full recovery and had become a staunch supporter of Alex's cause. Miller was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Russo received 8, and Webb, due to his cooperation, received 5. The judge, in his sentencing remarks, looked directly at Miller. "You did more than steal property," he said, his voice ringing with contempt. "You stole the community's trust. You betrayed your oath, your fellow officers, and the very concept of justice you swore to uphold. And in your greed, you were willing to sacrifice a man's life. There is no greater sin for an officer of the law." With the criminal case concluded, the city's will to fight Alex's civil lawsuit evaporated. Their lawyers, who had once been so dismissive, were now desperate to settle. They knew that a jury trial with the body cam footage and the testimony of the convicted officers would result in a catastrophic, multi-million-dollar verdict. Evelyn Reed held all the cards, and she played them masterfully. The final settlement was one of the largest in the city's history, $1.5 million for Alex Cole. But the victory was about more than money. As a non-negotiable condition of the settlement, Evelyn demanded sweeping, systemic reforms within the Phoenix Police Department. The department was forced to agree to a comprehensive consent decree, overseen by a federal judge. The decree mandated a complete overhaul of its policies regarding interactions between police and other first responders at emergency scenes. It explicitly stated that in a medical emergency, the ranking medical professional on site had authority over patient care, and that police interference with that care was grounds for immediate termination. Furthermore, the department had to implement a new, anonymous, early warning system for reporting officer misconduct, designed to protect whistleblowers like Mark Evans. Evans, for his role in exposing the conspiracy, was given federal protection and later allowed to transfer to a new department in a different state to begin his career anew. The day the settlement was announced, Alex stood on the steps of the courthouse, flanked by Evelyn and Marcus Thorne. He wasn't wearing his paramedic uniform, just a simple suit. He looked out at the sea of reporters and microphones, not with triumph, but with a quiet, weary resolve. "This was never about me," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It was about making sure that no paramedic, no EMT, no firefighter ever has to choose between doing their job and being arrested. It was about protecting the public from those who would use a badge to commit crimes instead of preventing them." He looked over at Marcus Thorne. "The most important thing is that good people can get the help they need when they need it most, without interference." His fight was over. He had been arrested, jailed, and had his name dragged through the mud. He had faced down a corrupt system and the infamous blue wall of silence. And he had won. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for every first responder who had ever been bullied or intimidated by an officer on a power trip. He had not only cleared his name, he had cleansed a part of the system, ensuring that the next paramedic who stood up for their patient would have the full force of law and policy behind them. He had sought justice, and in doing so, he had created a legacy of reform that would protect others for years to come. In the years that followed, the impact of Alex Cole's ordeal rippled across the state and the nation. The consent decree forced upon the Phoenix Police Department became a model for other cities looking to reform their own protocols. The body camera footage of Alex's arrest became a mandatory training tool, not just for police recruits, but for paramedics and EMTs as well. It was a powerful, real-world lesson in de-escalation, professional responsibility, and the critical importance of knowing your rights and duties. Invested by the case, the Arizona State Legislature passed a new bill, colloquially known as the First Responders Shield Law. The law created specific legal protections for on-duty emergency medical personnel, making it a felony for any person, including a law enforcement officer, to intentionally obstruct or interfere with the rendering of life-saving medical care. Alex was invited to the governor's office to witness the signing. He stood quietly in the back of the room, feeling a sense of profound, complicated pride as his personal battle was codified into law for the protection of all. Alex returned to his job at the Phoenix Fire Department. He went back to Unit 22, back to running calls with his partner Ben, back to the daily rhythm of saving lives. But something had changed. The other paramedics and firefighters looked at him with a new level of respect, a quiet acknowledgement of the battle he had fought for all of them. He was still just Alex, the guy who made terrible coffee but could intubate a patient in a moving ambulance. But he was also a symbol. He never sought the spotlight. He turned down book deals and requests for television interviews. For him, the victory was in the changes that had been made and in the quiet of his own conscience. He continued to work the streets, to be the calm voice in the chaos, to be the steady hand for people on the worst day of their lives. But the ordeal left its scars. For a long time, he would feel a spike of anxiety whenever a police car pulled up to one of his scenes. He would find himself subconsciously assessing the officer's posture, their tone of voice, looking for the telltale signs of an overinflated ego. The trust he once had in the uniform, the easy camaraderie between first responders, was fractured. It was a wound that healed slowly, if ever completely. He kept in touch with Marcus Thorne. They would meet for lunch a few times a year. Thorne had become a passionate advocate for first responder rights, testifying at legislative hearings and donating generously to the Paramedics Union Legal Fund. "You fought for me when I couldn't," Thorne would always say, his voice thick with emotion. "Now I'll fight for you." That bond, forged in a moment of crisis, was a constant reminder to Alex of why he had made his stand. He had done it for the patient. Everything else was just fallout. The story of Daniel Miller and the wrecking crew became a cautionary tale within law enforcement, a stark example of how arrogance and greed could lead to ruin. The blue wall of silence had been breached, proving that it was not impenetrable. And the hero of the story wasn't a cop or a fed, but an ordinary paramedic who simply refused to back down from his duty. He had shown that one person's integrity, armed with the truth, could be more powerful than a corrupt system. His legacy wasn't written in headlines, but in the safer, more respectful interactions happening at thousands of emergency scenes every day. He had fought the system and won, but the quiet cost of that battle was something he would carry with him on every call that came after. The incident's roots lie deep in the psychology of a man like Daniel Miller. His actions weren't just a momentary lapse in judgment. They were the culmination of a personality flaw nurtured by a system that too often rewards aggression and unquestioning authority. Miller likely suffered from a narcissistic sense of entitlement, believing the badge granted him supremacy in any situation. This was compounded by the thrill of the grift. Getting away with the thefts fueled a god complex, making him feel smarter and more powerful than everyone else. The paramedic's calm, professional refusal to comply wasn't just a logistical problem for his theft. It was a direct challenge to his inflated self-worth. The arrest became a desperate public act to reassert the dominance he felt was his birthright as an officer. Looking back, one might wonder what Alex could have done differently. If he had been equipped with his own department-issued body camera, its presence might have deterred Miller from escalating, as the officer's actions would be documented from a second, impartial perspective. If a fire department supervisor like Captain Haskins had arrived 30 seconds earlier, his rank might have been enough to short-circuit Miller's power trip before it reached a point of no return. Perhaps if Alex had immediately stated, "Officer, your interference is now being officially logged with dispatch," the creation of an immediate paper trail might have given Miller pause. These are hypotheticals, but they serve as crucial learning points. Clear documentation, early supervisory intervention, and visible recording can be powerful shields for first responders. The ultimate lesson from this harrowing event is one of profound moral clarity. True duty is not owed to a uniform or a title, but to human life. Alex Cole's story teaches us that integrity is not defined by the absence of conflict, but by the choices we make when faced with it. He demonstrated that challenging an unlawful order is not an act of insubordination, but the highest form of responsibility. He proved that a system, no matter how broken or corrupt, can be held accountable by the unwavering conviction of a single individual acting in the service of another. His ordeal is a testament to the idea that the true measure of a hero isn't just in the lives they save, but in the principles they are willing to fight for. What would you have done in Alex's position? Have you ever had to challenge authority to do the right thing in your own job? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe in supporting our first responders, please share this story.